It's one thing when you have a teenager or somebody who can help with how do I use technology, but where it gets really dangerous is when you have somebody without that experience helping you to secure your technology and thinking, oh, my buddy, my friend, my nephew has got my cybersecurity taken care of. And that's some of the stuff that we'll talk about a little bit today.
Oh yeah. I mean, cybersecurity to me is it's malpractice not to protect your data. For some companies, I think it's existential actually, if they don't have adequate protections. So I'm very interested, Kathy, in your presentation for sure.
Go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Today's Wednesday Wisdom session, we have an amazing a couple of speakers that are going to speak to you today, geared focused on cybersecurity. Before we jump into today's program, I want to actually just do a little bit of housekeeping. For those that have your cameras on, thank you. For those that do not have your cameras on, we'd love to see your smiling faces. So if you'd like to turn those cameras on, that would be great. We just ask that you also keep your microphones muted during the presentation. There will be a Q&A session where you'll be able to ask questions. And during that session, you can drop those questions in the chat, or you can raise your hand and unmute yourself to ask that particular question. Okay, so jumping into today's agenda, and I'm going to introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker is Bob Welsh, and Bob Welsh is the Senior Business Advisor at C&W Technologies, which is a full-function IT department for small businesses. Bob is wrapping up his 9th year at C&W, where he transformed the business into the Treasure Coast's leading provider of IT services and network management. Bob is primarily responsible for business development and overseeing the acquisitions of new customers. He's also getting business technology to work for customers as they expect it to work and to make their daily lives easier and more productive. He lives in Palm City with his wife and has three grown children and is an avid golfer. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Good to have you. Our other speaker is Kathy Myron. And Kathy is the president and CEO of eSilo, which is a data backup and cybersecurity company that's based in Jupiter. She's a seasoned leader, a business leader and technology strategist with 18 years of experience helping organizations secure their data and avoid costly downtime that occurs with IT systems fails or if you get hacked. Kathy started her career at General Electric, where she worked her way up from an entry-level business analysis to become a VP and a CTO. She has a global and international experience, having led multi-million-dollar IT programs and digital transformation incentives. She joined eSilo in 2018 to bring her knowledge to smaller, less sophisticated organizations and help them avoid common IT mistakes that their clients that put their clients and information at risk. Outside of eSilo, Kathy is active in small business community as a speaker, trainer, certified small business mentor with SCORE, and she serves as the board of directors at Tech Hub South Florida, which is a 501c6 nonprofit and technology advisory committee for the Palm Beach County School District. Welcome, Kathy.
Thanks, Tracy. Happy to be here with you all.
Awesome. So we're going to go ahead and jump into the presentation. We have Mr. Bob Welsh. I'm going to go ahead and give you access. You can actually share your presentation, sir.
Well, I think I did it. No, I didn't. What?
Not yet.
Okay. Now?
Not seeing it yet. There we go.
Okay, well, first I want to start by saying thank you to Grassford and Keely and Absentia. Also Tracy, she's been a great help. I want to welcome everybody and talk a little bit about how as chairman or a CEO or CFO or business owner should be looking at and thinking about cybersecurity. So I'm Bob, you know Kathy, the introductions have been made, so let's start. So the idea of protecting your business in the face of cyber terrorism is and should be paramount in the head of every owner, every CFO, every CEO of companies large and small. It's always about awareness and risk management. So when you look at the C-level, risk management is something that executives deal with all the time, and the idea of securing their information and protecting their intellectual property and all that good stuff should be paramount in their minds. It's also always about a culture. If the employees on your company, on your team are not thinking about security, then they're doing things like opening bogus emails, they're getting Visa gift cards at someone's direction, they are being just unaware, and the evildoers that are out there prey on the people that are unaware. Excuse me, but most of all, cybersecurity is about leadership, and it needs to have direction come from the top rather than allowing other people to handle the issues. So the threats are real. They hang above us like a storm cloud waiting to strike. I hear so many times a business owner say, it will never happen to me. It'll be like getting hit by lightning. Well, chances are that it's going to happen, and not if it happens, but when it happens. Are you prepared? And so the typical business owner that I meet isn't worried. He's let somebody deal with it, whether it's a company like ours, whether it's his net, like Kathy was saying before, or somebody was saying his nephew, his friend, his friend's friend, whatever. And they are entrusting, really, as Grassford said earlier, off camera, they're entrusting the life of their business with someone who's ill-prepared to protect it. You can see over the last 6 years, the situation is getting worse and only getting worse, more worse. 40 attacks per second in 2016 and 11 per second today. So that's a pretty big increase. It's a 5-fold increase. About 62%, these are statistics, you know, there are statistics all over the place, so I don't really have to qualify them. They're all about the same. About 62% of the attacks in 2020 were on small, mid-sized businesses. Significant number lost business, lost customers, lost revenue, and even more lost crucial data. And intellectual property is one of the most important things a business can protect, and it's often what people are looking for, you know, top secrets, company secrets. Surprisingly, 30% of the attacks are in Florida. So 62% of the attacks are small business and 30 attacks are in Florida. You know, Florida is a hotbed, and those of us who live here should be even more aware than somebody who lives, you know, in a state that's less desirable.
Bob, can I just chime in on that one real quick?
Sure.
That 30% statistic, guys, is global. This isn't just 30% of the US ransomware attacks, right? This is globally. Florida entities, Florida individuals seem to, for whatever reason, be the target of over a third or about a third of those attacks. And so, you know, very, very relevant to us and our businesses right now. So sorry, Bob, I just wanted to emphasize that point.
Even more terrifying is the idea that Grassford said that it's an existential issue. I've seen 65%, this one said 72%, the article I read, far more than 50% of companies that are breached and suffer significant loss cannot recover. So one of the questions I always ask prospective customers of ours is, how long can you survive if your company can't work? Is it a day, a week, a month? Not too many can last more than a few months. So it is an existential threat. In the first quarter of 2021, sorry, it seemed like so long ago. It was only 9 months ago. These were some of the major breaches. And you can imagine the money that the NBA and McDonald's and Kia are spending to protect their information, yet they suffered significant breaches. I think the most infamous, was the Colonial Pipeline. And the Colonial one was pretty much a typical way it happens. Somebody got into the accounting department. Through the accounting department, they got into the main company. They shut the company down. It wasn't that Colonial couldn't pump, it was that Colonial couldn't bill. And so they shut down over financials and their inability to get paid for their oil. There's two, maybe three main ways that a company gets breached. The first is called phishing with a PH. People probably have seen that PHISHING. That's a bogus email, like the one we got the other night saying our Amazon Prime can't be renewed because our credit card has expired. It was a perfect email. There was not a flaw in it, except that it was fake. And you get that, they prey a lot on older people. They get that, they get nervous, they click in, they give them their social security number. I can't tell you the number of people who call and say that Windows called them and they gave them their credit card. But Windows is a product. Windows doesn't call people. Microsoft doesn't call people, and Apple doesn't call people. So anyone who is telling you that Windows called them is obviously prone to be duped. The second is through phishing, which is a voicemail, and that's calling and saying, I'm from Apple, and we need to get into your computer. You have some malware that's been discovered. The end goal for businesses, at least, is ransomware and holding your information totally secure to them, but not you. Typically, you have to pay that with Bitcoin if you're not protected. If you don't have good services in place, if you don't have good backup in place, Kathy's going to talk about backup, that's her specialty. And it's mind-boggling because these companies, these attacking people, they actually have customer service departments. So you get ransomware, there'll be a phone number, you'll call them up and you'll have to ask them, how do I buy Bitcoin? And they'll walk you through the process. And it's insidious, and it's happening more and more, at least 11 times a second, someone's trying to grab somebody's information. Then there's this guy, this is called a Tor browser. Like, you have your Edge browser, you have your Firefox browser. Tor is a browser that will take you below the surface level of the internet into what's called the deep web. Once on the deep web, there are no rules. You can hire, I could get somebody who was Tor proficient and hire a hitman and have an enemy of mine, taken out. Really like in a movie, professional hitman. I could have somebody hack a company and shut them down just because I had a bad experience. If I had enough money, I could hire somebody and shut down, I suppose, Delta Airlines if I was determined to do it. So there is crime to be had. It's ransomware as service primarily. Willie Sutton was a famous bank robber. They said, why do you rob banks? He said, well, that's where the money is. So why do they hack these machines and these networks? Because that's where the money is. The more money there than in the banks. Despite it all, there's 68%. This is a 2019 slide. 68% of small business owners are not worried it's going to happen to them. It's like getting hit by lightning. I'll never get hit by lightning. But guess what? People get hit by lightning. A lot of the attacks are random. They're bombarding you with IP addresses. If they hit yours and you don't have protection, they get in. So it's real dichotomy here of the risk versus the awareness. So from the owner suite, from the C-suite, cybersecurity and prevention of loss is really a risk. Prevention of loss is no different than Lowe's having their security cameras and all that. They have a certain amount of money they're willing to lose. I don't know how many small businesses can walk away and say, well, we lose 100,000 in a year, that's okay. We'll limit it to that. So risk and managing your risk is critically important as a business owner. Like everything in life, it comes down to people, it comes to planning. You have to have a plan, primarily a disaster recovery plan, which is Kathy's expertise. You have to have a process. How do we handle our data? Who has access? Who has access to what? And you have to have technology. Now, technology, if you talk to the guys in my office, the technicians, they'll tell you that, there's a new box out. It does this, new software does that. Technology is only as good as what's in the world today. It doesn't see forward. 95% of money spent on cybersecurity is spent on technology. Where the really critical issues are is in the planning and the process. And so technology is very important for sure, but it's not about only technology. So now it's going to turn this over to Kathy, and she'll take us through the rest.
All right, thanks, Bob. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And let me know when you guys can see that. So the $1 million question is, how do I know if I've got effective cybersecurity? And so the question I would throw back to you is, well, what are you spending in terms of budget? Do you understand your cyber risk? What mitigations do you have in place? How are you prioritizing your critical assets and your critical data? So oftentimes when owners and C-suites and board level executives ask, how do I know if I have a good cybersecurity program, if I'm doing everything that I should to protect against and guard against these types of threats? The answers to that question really come down to these four. So we'll just move through these relatively quickly, just because I do want to make sure that we have enough time for your questions. But there is some insight that I did want to share. So the first is when it comes to budget, right? So at the end of the day, the C-suite and the board ultimately decide what the cybersecurity budget should be. So that needs to follow top down, or flow, I should say, top down, not be something driven from the bottom up. Because if you ask your lower level IT manager or IT admin to come up with a cybersecurity budget or come up with a cybersecurity strategy without a good understanding of what all your cyber risk is, chances are they're going to come up with a budget based on some percentage of what they already have to spend. And oftentimes we find that that's not enough. So a good way when thinking about your budget is to look across other peers to see what is typical. So typically in different industries, it'll vary, but typically it's between 4 to 6% of revenue is what you're spending on your IT. So if that's, let's just average it out and call it 5%. Then of that IT budget, you typically want to be spending about 10% of it on cybersecurity related activities. And that might be everything from preventative controls and tools. So antivirus, firewalls, education. So security awareness training for your people, backups, right? So a little bit proactive as well as reactive. But then you also want to be looking at other areas of cybersecurity spend and other how you mitigate risk in other areas. So that's kind of where you start from. But as I always like to tell my clients, cybersecurity is a combination of kind of risk and reward, or in this case, risk versus cost. So a smaller organization isn't going to have an unlimited budget to spend on every fancy tool, on preventing every possible attack from very obscure or less likely scenarios. And so what I tell everybody is you need to start with a risk assessment so that you understand for your business model, the industries, the locations that you operate in, where are your highest areas of risk, and making sure that those things, the types of scenarios that can bring your business to its knees and close its doors or gravely affect your reputation and your clients, those are the things that you are spending your time and effort and resources to address. And so one of the easiest ways to do that is to think about risk in terms of impact and likelihood. So likelihood is something where you have the greatest levers to control, right? How likely is it that someone's going to click on that bogus phishing email if they get it? Well, the better that I train them, the less likely they are to click on it. What you have less control over is the impact. So when somebody clicks on a phishing email and it installs malware on their PC, and that malware spreads to other machines on the network, it is, especially for a small business, it is less within your ability to control and contain that readily. If you are a larger organization with very sophisticated security ops, then yes, that would absolutely be the kind of thing that you would have your security team working on. But just know that between impact and likelihood is really where you're going to probably focus the most. And then in order to set a budget, you have to be able to actually quantify that risk, meaning put dollars on it. And so it looks like complicated math. I promise it's not, but we'll just have a couple of very quick examples for how you can start to quantify your risk. So in this example, we're talking about a breach of PII, or personally identifiable information. So if you work in the medical space or handle consumer information, right? So name, social security number, driver's license, that type of information is what we're talking about here. And if you look at industry studies, it tells you have about a 50-50 probability of experiencing a data breach in any given year. And we know that the average cost of one of those breaches is about $150 per record. So using simple math, you can calculate that this risk to my company, right, impact times likelihood, is going to be about $7,500. Whereas if you contrast that with something like ransomware, where based on different sources, you could say, let's just be conservative and say about 30% of small and medium-sized businesses are going to be targeted in a given year. And that the average ransom, and this is a couple of years ago, so it's actually gone up since, but is about $133,000, according to the FBI. So that incident is going to, or that risk, I should say, is going to potentially cost your business $38,000. So when you think about where to allocate your limited cybersecurity resources and budget, do you want to be protecting against the threat of ransomware with robust anti-malware programs, with robust cybersecurity training for your team? Or are you more concerned about a data breach where the controls that you would put in place might be a little bit different? And they have to do with, accidental disclosure of information and things like that. So your inherent risk is your likelihood and your impact, but the way that you reduce that inherent risk is with the effective controls. And so controls are the processes, tools, and procedures that you use to lower that likelihood or lower that impact. They ultimately soften the blow and help bring the cost of that risk within spec for you and your organization. So how do you mitigate risk with controls? There's a whole bunch of different, what I would call building blocks for how that happens. And so we'll move through these pretty quickly, but then you'll see, I think, on the next page, how they come together. So the first is having a good asset inventory. If you don't know what your assets are, whether they're physical assets, so maybe that's equipment or computers or other things that you use to deliver services and products to your clients, or digital assets, so intellectual property, patents that you might own, or other information, right? If you don't know where your assets are, you're not going to be able to effectively protect them. And then similarly, you have to also then manage access to those assets, so those assets don't walk off with a employee who leaves or gets stolen. And also to ensure that, especially when it comes to data, you're compartmentalizing your risk. So to the extent possible, you don't have any one employee who can create invoices and then pay them, or have admin access to a system where their day-to-day job duties wouldn't or shouldn't require them to have that level of access. Of course, for everything, you're going to want strong passwords. And I would say a strong, unique, complex password these days isn't enough anymore. You need to have a password manager to manage all of those, but more importantly, you need what's called multi-factor authentication, or MFA. And so all MFA is a additional level of control for you to prove your identity to any system or any website at the time of login. So usually MFA requires a combination of something which is your password, and something you have, which is a rotating 6-digit code that might have been sent to you through an SMS message or more securely through an authenticator app on your phone. Then you also need a security policy. And so a lot of small businesses say, I don't feel like I'm large enough to need this bureaucratic piece of paper. And what I would tell you is that a security policy is more than just a piece of paper that people sign and then, stick in an HR folder, never to be seen again. But it is how you, as the business owner or executive, outline your requirements for what your staff and team do to protect the information and assets of the company. So we've seen a lot with the rise in remote work, given the pandemic. People are using personal devices to access company data. They're working from home offices. They are doing a lot of different things that in a traditional office setting weren't necessarily risk factors. And so one of the ways that you can address that is through a clear information security policy that says, when you are using personal devices, you're attesting that these devices have up-to-date antivirus, up-to-date software updates, et cetera, right? Not used by other family members, not shared. Those are the kinds of things that you would capture there. And then, of course, if you have a policy, you need to train people on it. It's not fair to tell people, here's what we expect of you, but not educate them on exactly how they can implement that or why that matters. And then, of course, for all of the components, the computing equipment and devices that people are using, you need to ensure that those devices are well secured. The networks that people are connecting to are well secured, and that whatever data they have is sufficiently backed up, not just locally, but also offsite. That way, if there is a pervasive malware attack on a network or a device, or just a hurricane, right? We live in Florida, that there's going to be an additional copy of that data that has not been affected by that disaster. And then kind of the last piece, which didn't really fit well in any of the other buckets, is really email security. And so Bob mentioned these bogus phishing emails. Phishing is one of the #1 attack vectors for how malware gets into an environment and into a device. So the better spam filters and security filters you have on your email, the less likely any of that ever gets in front of an end user for them to even potentially click on it. So those are all kind of the building blocks. And so blocks in and of themselves are great, but if you don't assemble them properly into a nice kind of watertight, if you will, configuration, then you leave these cracks in the middle. And so you can, a lot of business owners get frustrated because they spend a lot of money on different tools and things that their IT consultant or whomever recommended, but then they still get breached. And I think a big piece of what people are missing is you can buy the tools and implement them. That's one thing. But if you don't train your people, if you don't set clear standards, if you don't integrate everything together and then monitor it appropriately, then it's not necessarily going to get you the mitigation and the security that you were maybe expecting. So then switching gears a little bit, when you think about what you own in your business in terms of data that needs to be secured and how to best secure it, this 4-blocker chart I think would be really helpful. So on the x-axis, you're focused on the data that is critical to secure. So there is a clear regulatory or compliance or customer expectation that you are securing this information because of the harm that it can cause your clients and you if it gets out there. So that's social security numbers, payment information, bank information, any trade secrets, anything that's proprietary. But then on the y-axis, you have what is critical to operations. So it may not be incredibly sensitive. You're not necessarily going to get a fine from the FTC if you were to lose or breach that data, but it is absolutely essential to your own survival and day-to-day transactions. So that might be your customer contact list. If you're a service company, that might be your scheduling tool so that you can deploy, site engineers or what have you, marketing information, right? So those are some things that are maybe critical to day-to-day ops that you still need to secure because the lack of access to that data, again, in a ransomware attack or some other kind of attack that takes your network offline, would still be devastating to your company. So I'm a big believer in frameworks. So there was a psychologist in the early 1900s, Maslow, who came up with this kind of hierarchy of needs. A lot of people are familiar with it. And the whole idea is that human beings have certain basic needs that have to be met in order for us to focus on higher order type activities. So the first is like food, water, and shelter. Once we have those, we can start to worry about or care about things like our own personal safety, our health. And then only when those needs are met can we focus on relationships and then our self-esteem, and then ultimately kind of being, at the top of the pyramid, being who we were meant to be, the best versions of ourselves. For small businesses, I think that there's a similar hierarchy of needs as well. And at the bottom rung, it's, do I have systems that work, that turn on, that do what they're supposed to do, right? That's your basic transaction level processing. And once you have that need met, then the next logical step is, well, are those systems secure? Is the data inside of it secure? Can it be trusted? Can and should I make business decisions off of it? Then it's, well, how does this system or set of systems help me automate process, make me more efficient, right? Enable my company to grow and scale and do more. And then on top of that, it's how can technology help me reach new markets, serve better clients in stickier ways? And then at the very top, how can I disrupt my industry using technology like Uber or an Airbnb? And very often I talk to small businesses who are really excited about the top of the pyramid, right? They want to invest in all the sexy marketing and they want to build a mobile app and they want to do all this cool stuff, but they don't really have an appreciation for the foundational rungs of that ladder that they need. And so just like anything, you would never build a house on a shaky foundation, right? Because this is what you get when that happens. So I would just encourage you that at the board level, at the C-suite level, there needs to be just as much conversation about how do we ensure a strong foundation for our technology as in the top of the pyramid with all the really cool stuff that we can do with technology. So really the takeaway that I would leave you with is security is all about effective layers of defense. So in an old school castle model, right, you've got outer walls, inner walls, moats, and turrets and secret rooms, right? You've got all these different things and escape hatches that get you out if the intruders breach all of those defenses. That's how you need to think about your cybersecurity. So it ultimately comes down to having the right budget, the right awareness of your risk, implementing the right smart mitigations based on that risk, and prioritizing appropriately to ensure that your crown jewels at a minimum are the ones that have the right protection. And I'm a big Tim Ferriss fan. And he says that you can fail at plenty as long as you get a couple of important things right. And as Bob mentioned, our business, eSilo, is all about disaster recovery and backups. So the one thing I would want to leave you with is you can put in place all of these defenses, but you have to plan for the day and assume for the scenario that at some point with enough focused time and attention, an attacker can and will breach all of those preventative defenses. So you do have to have a what if plan. I was going to use a 4-letter word, an bleep plan for what you're going to do when that happens. And one of the best ways to do that is with a set of offsite data backups. So with that, I wanted to open it up to questions. We went through quite a bit pretty quickly. But fire away, let me know what's on your mind and how else we can help you prepare for the day that you get attacked.
This is the time, if you have any questions, you can actually unmute yourself and ask that question, or you can drop it in the chat.
Casey, I'd like to say that, something we discussed off camera was we would offer any of the attendees here a free security analysis. And it will give them a pretty decent report on the state of their state. So if anyone's interested in that, they can reach out to us.
Okay, if you have your information, we can also drop that in the chat. And I'm sure you have a slide that has your contact information as well that we can share with our guests.
Yeah, there we go.
Perfect. So you guys can screenshot that information or take a picture of that information. As a chamber member, we will make this presentation available in our next email communication that we send out in our newsletter. And again, if you always want to go back and reference this video, this replay, it is on the Black Chambers YouTube channel.
I'm curious if anyone here has been in a company that's been breached. So I'll ask that question. Has anyone been breached?
Yeah, I have. This is Grassford. I have. And I think that some people have been breached and probably don't even realize it. That's also part of the problem. But yes. Bob, may I ask you a question?
Certainly.
In terms of the free security analysis that you just referenced,
Mhm.
do I understand that that's available to even those who are not on today's call?
Sure, absolutely. And any of your members.
Okay, all right. I just want to make sure to be clear on that. Thank you.
I think Kathy has not a security analysis, but I think she has something else too.
I do offer the exact same thing. So we'll do a free assessment, but usually the way that I approach it is as part of a strategy call.
Understood.
What I found is that every company is different. And so a lot of what we've shared today is a bit generic of sort of how to think about it, frameworks, ways to approach it. But I recognize that it's really difficult to tailor that to every industry, every scenario. And so if you want to schedule a one-on-one with me just to have a chat about what you're doing, meetkathy.com gives you direct access to my calendar. So you can just drop something in there and we'll spend a half an hour talking about what's on your mind, what are some of the challenges you're facing. And if I can give you some strategies that'll help right then and there, I will.
Thank you. And can we take this down so we can see each other now?
I like that.
That's good. Awesome. Does anyone have any questions you'd like to ask before we move into our closing remarks? I see Sean, I see Latricia, Ashley. How you guys doing? No questions?
Questions?
Okay. Tracy, do you have anything before I close?
Yes, I do. Actually, I just want to highlight some of our new members that we have with the Black Chamber. We have Emerald Point Title LLC. We have the Leadership Haven Resource Center LLC. We have Law Office at Edric Barnes, the Fellows Media, and Grassroots Consulting Inc. If you're on this call and you are not a member and you're interested in joining the Black Chamber, definitely just give me a call, or you can go to our website. You can go to the website and you'll see the actual sign up online. And we have a new micro business level. So we had our individual, we had nonprofit, we have a micro business, which is $150 annually for membership. And then we have small business, which is the $300. So I just wanted to let you all know that as far as the new level, I wanted to welcome our new members and I thank you all for joining us today. Grassford.
Thank you very much, Tracy, for going over the new members. And I got to tell you, we are so focused on what we can do to assist you with your businesses. Just this morning, Tracy and I, she can tell you, we spoke for about 45 minutes about that topic. And we're always thinking and talking about what additional benefits that we can make sure our members have. And that includes today. I think this presentation that we just got from Bob and Kathy was truly excellent. In fact, I actually did a cybersecurity course at Harvard, and what we heard today was nothing different than what I got in that process. They were truly, truly excellent. And like Kathy said, it can't be tailored to your business. So I think the offer of an assessment or analysis of your particular needs is something that I think you should take them up on that offer. I think that's a great offer, and you all did a great job, Kathy and Bob. So thank you again. And also I want to recognize our sponsor, BBIC, for their partnership with the Chamber. Please look out for all of their financial products that are tailored to you. And I know this is being broadcasted. We'll continue doing that. And we'll make sure all of our other members know to reach out to Kathy and Bob in regards to that, their services. All right. So with that, have a good rest of your day. We'll give you back about 18 minutes before 1 o'clock. All right. Talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.